I think you and I are on the same page, though, with thinking that it would have to be some sort of federation or confederation. We just have to get other people, I think, to start even exploring that
Well, this
idea.
this conversation helps, you know. Like
Yeah,
part of it is people like us having this conversation, bringing it to the forefront. You know, and again, I want to reiterate the framework of let's find a solution that allows Jews to be safe and provides justice for Palestinians, and also let's think of solutions that are viable and also solutions that don't radicalize the population. So there's this unseen consequence of war and conflict, right? We have the numbers of how many people die, how many people are injured, but how many people are radicalized,
mm,
right? How many people are traumatized? So currently, the Israeli population is the most radical it's ever been, and so is the Palestinian population. This is a consequence of conflict. And when Palestinians hear about calls for removal of the land, all that does is aid in their radicalization. And when Jews hear about dismantling Israel or removing Jews from the land, that just aids in the radicalization. And a radical population is less oriented towards peace. So let's think of solutions that don't push the populations farther away from each other, but rather bring them closer to one another.
yeah, yeah. Um, and that I think that is extremely important to get to that. And I do think that, I do think Hamas needs to end. I think that that government needs to be ousted completely, and the Israelis cannot be subjected to Hamas, and neither can the Palestinian people. They don't like it either.
Great.
Uh, they
No.
just have felt like they don't have any options. Palestinians have kind of run out of options, and they've clung on to desperate measures, and that's putting people in that position is only going to produce really, really horrible results, and that's what's happened to the Palestinian people. But Hamas has to go. I do think that working together, if the Israelis and the Palestinians created a one federation, for example, and they had a shared basic law amongst each then area can have their own laws on top of that, but a shared federal law that said that this type of radical extremism that the settlers going through and doing the things that they do to the Palestinians, and then the radical Hamas types wanting to go and kill Jews, those people need to be rounded up and held accountable for their crimes. It would be just no different than how we combat extremism anywhere in the world when they're living as your citizens under your laws. We have murders every day here in the United States. How do we deal with it? We go after the murderer, we put them in jail, right? We hold them accountable. And that would be the same thing. I mean, we're never going to eradicate, unfortunately, death, murder, atrocities. People kill like I said, in the United States, we've got people murdering people. In my neighborhood, people get killed. But we have laws, and we have laws that try to keep peace and security nobody can guarantee full security, right? I can't be told I'm never going to have somebody break into my home or try to kill me, but we could certainly try our best. I mean, that's what we do, and we'd round these people up and put them in jail. It would have to be the same sort of thing, trying to just go after them when they commit crimes. I think there would be a lot of people in jail at first, but I do think that it would calm down over time, and people would start to feel more secure, and they'd start to settle in to living together. But it would be a rough go. I don't think there's any, I mean, I don't have any thinking like, oh yeah, we'll just open up the borders over there and everything's going to be fine and everyone's going to be safe and it's going to be kumbaya, like you said. No, it's going to be dirty and ugly, probably for a couple of generations.
Right. That's the challenge, because the second it gets dirty and ugly, then the people are going to start voting for somebody who wants to create the separation again. So people aren't going to
Right.
just accept violence as like part of the norm, right? So like Israel is the second that whatever solution causes an increase of violence, you'll have some hardliner come along and be very popular, because in times of war, in times of fear, that's who you vote for. So it's almost like we need to find a way that, and I do think there will always, whatever solution we find, there will be those against it, and they might try to disrupt the peace process through violence. I think that's inevitable. But if we could contain it to a small amount and be able to isolate these people and have both populations speak out against violence, I think that would go a long way.
Hmm.
I think one of the fears Israelis have, it's not just that um, civilians have been the primary target of Palestinian resistance. It's that it hasn't been condemned. So there's this idea. Not only has it not been condemned, it's often praised. So there's this idea in Israeli society that the majority of Palestinians support violence against civilians, and it gives them a very deep sense of mistrust. Now, it's quite possible that the majority don't support violence against Palestinians, but they're scared to speak up because sometimes it just takes a violent minority to have a more peaceful majority be scared,
Hmm.
right? So that it's an interesting challenge we have, but I think we need to um, whatever the solution is, it's not going to be an overnight solution. There needs to be a reconciliation process. I think
Yeah.
Israel needs to invest money into a reconciliation committee. I think there needs to be, like, I'll just talk about some good faith measures. I think we could do, and everything I'm going to say is relevant for both sides, but I'll speak to the Israeli side. Israel can acknowledge wrongdoing. It very rarely. I mean, I can't think of a time it's ever acknowledged wrongdoing towards Palestinians. It could acknowledge and teach the Palestinian narrative as legitimate. We could teach our citizens Arabic so we could actually communicate with the other side. It's hard to have peace with the population you can't speak the same language with. Um, we can we currently have the security apparatus in the West Bank that is keeping the 600,000 Jews living there safe. This security apparatus is seen as a protector to one side, but an oppressor to the other side. How can we maybe replace this security force with one that is seen as a protector to both people?
Hmm.
Right? A force that speaks Arabic as well, that treats Palestinians with dignity and respect. And when there's an abuse of power by the security force, they're held accountable. Right? So these are things we can start to implement to bring us closer to a peaceful resolution. And what I think would really go a long way on the Palestinian side is to really uh, renounce violence and accept Israel's right to exist. And I know that's hard. They see Israel as this evil entity, um, and that's why I think transforming Israel will help them
Hmm.
um, recognize Israel's right to exist. But the fastest way towards peace is really for that recognition and for us to begin these good faith measures on both sides.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really great things, and I think that if both sides were to really come to the table and create a solution, I do think it would be good for them to require schools to teach both languages. Kids that go to school in
Yep.
Israel must learn Arabic. Kids in Palestine must learn Hebrew, and also the education. I think it all comes down to education and teaching kids. That's what both sides say about each other, right? Well, they teach their kids to hate us. And
Right.
Palestinians say that about Israelis. Israelis say that about Palestinians. And both sides have videos of it. And, I mean, it's just really, but teaching the kids that, we are neighbors, we're a community, we actually share, we live together. And so we need to be able to communicate with one another. Also teaching them things like about the Holocaust and teaching the kids, and then also teaching Israeli kids about the Nakba, which is, I don't think you guys are even allowed to talk about that there. The trauma that the Palestinians have undergone, and also the trauma that the Jews have undergone. And all of that needs to be recognized and a shared understanding. Um, and that will lead to, I think, the Palestinians say, well, you've been our oppressors. And they, I think, have, from my viewpoint, a legitimacy to that. And that's where I think, just like in the United States, dealing with Black Americans and white Americans and the history of Black Americans, and there needing to be that reckoning of and an acknowledgement of slavery happened, segregation happened, and it was wrong. And this one group did it to the other group. But we then move on, right? We have to move on. Of course, there's people that don't. There's people that don't move on and they want to keep on talking about that and they want reparations and they want more something to be done to sort of correct that past. And you're always going to get those people. But by and large, the majority have just moved on and said, we're just having to live our lives now. Like, we recognize that we got to move on. And maybe there needs to be that same sort of education there. It's going to be really tough, though. I mean, you and I could sit here all day and talk about all of these solutions that we think are reasonable, implementable. I do think these are not like fairy tale solutions. I think these are real solutions. I think you're right. Like, the military force, the IDF, can't just be Jewish Israeli only. It would need to be recruiting from Palestine and creating a shared security force that is both Palestinians and Israelis together, looking for the security of the entire region, saying we collectively share these borders. We collectively want to protect these borders. All of these are, but realistically, what's going on right now in Gaza is it looks like Bibi is a crazy person. As you know, he's on his way out. Everybody knows he's on his way out. And when a person is on their way out is when they're the most dangerous. And it looks like he is trying to implement his ideology, what he's always wanted to see, which is, and he's one of those that I do think wants all of Israel to be Israel, and that there is no real Palestinian. He wants to annex the West Bank. I don't know if that was him or if him placating the more hard right people who really want to annex. But it does look like he's trying to somehow salvage his legacy a little bit by saying, well, at least I got all of the land, and then I could go down as that, in the end. I mean, do you think that's what he's up to?
I think that's a good observation. I think that this is him saving face. It also helps explain the severity of the retaliation. After the attack on October 7th, he said, people will be held responsible, but now we're at war. And I could see some rationale to that, but it's also awfully convenient to want to wait, let people forget, let people forgive, and have a victory that he can show. I could very well see the general of the IDF, the Minister of Defense, the head of the Shabak. I could see them all stepping down once all is said and done. If anybody resists stepping down and tries to retain power, I would see that being Bibi.